He was a man so blunt yet polite that many struggled to believe he was a killer or even a human at all. Now, with the likes of death and the different natures of murder being so infinite, it is no wonder that we find great curiosity around the inner workings of those who kill. Most of the time, they act out of lust, love, revenge, or greed. But what if one decided to murder simply to know what it felt like? Does a crime without any real motive make them seem less morally bankrupt? Or does the senselessness behind their actions make them all the more terrifying? Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, folks. My name is Adrian, and welcome back to Coffeehouse Crime. Now, today, we're looking at one of the strangest killers that I've come across to date. This case really has to be seen to believed, least of all because of how bizarre the killer behaved throughout. Before we begin, and just to let you know that I post true crime and strange cases here weekly, so if that does sound like your kind of thing, please consider subscribing to the channel, it really does help me out. And now, with all formalities out the way, please grab yourself a coffee, pull up a seat and get ready for the deep dive. This is the case of Generro Sanchez. Howdy folks, and welcome to Oklahoma. Located in the south-central part of the United States, the Sooner State is well known for a variety of reasons. This of course includes its cowboy culture, Native American history, and its jaw-dropping natural beauty. But in a state that covers just over 175,000 square kilometers, which is incidentally nearly 3/4 of the size of the entire of the UK, it's not going to be without its fair share of criminals. Now, most of us will be familiar with the devastating Oklahoma City bombing that took place in 1995, where a truck driven by Timothy McVeigh and packed with explosives was detonated outside of the Alfred Murrah Federal Building. This resulted in the deaths of 168 people, while wounding more than 600 others. Following their devastating actions, McVeigh and his accomplice, Terry Nichols, were convicted of the crime in what was, and still remains, the deadliest act of domestic terrorism in US history. And even still, to this very day, it remains the troubled talk of the town. Honing in to our case today, we find ourselves over the town of Asher, which can be found in Pottawatomie County. Asher has always remained small, with an all-time peak population of 653 in the 1930s, that being thanks to its short-lived oil boom. First established in the late 1800s, its population steadily grew with the expansion of the rail network, and its hope for developing into a centre of trade and population grew with it. But when larger townships sprang up in Seminole and Kanawha, these hopes were quashed, and the town's prospects never seemed to recover. Being a small town, there isn't much of a notable economy here, and life is said to be slow, peaceful and sleepy. Asher does offer plenty of natural beauty though, with plenty of outdoor activities to enjoy, but otherwise, that is pretty much it. You won't find any McDonald's or Starbucks here, but living within this sleepy town, we could find a young man named Generro Sanchez. Born on August 7th, 1994 in the town of McAlester, Oklahoma, Generro was raised by his mother, Gina Waldrip, and his father, Marcos Sanchez. And growing up in the small town of Stewart, he graduated from high school in the year 2012. Described as fun, outgoing, loving, and full of life, Generro was a high-achieving student. And being a member of the Quiz Bowl team, he won many accolades for his academic achievements during his school years. Outside of school, G, as he was known to his friends, enjoyed movies, listening to music, and watching sports. It is understood that, apparently, the smooth-talking cartoon character Johnny Bravo was his hero. After graduating from school, he went on to study engineering at East Central University in Ada, Oklahoma, which can be found less than 30 miles from Asher. And this would be where he eventually met and made friends with a man named Jerrod Murray. Jerrod was born on July 20th, 1994. Now this guy was described by most as a little peculiar, even by his own friends. He had several quirky habits, and simply appeared to be strange. For example, in high school he often wore a full suit and tie to his classes. Now, there is nothing particularly wrong in doing that, but it was far from the usual dress code, and certainly made him stand out amongst his peers. Jerrod was described as being exceptionally bright, but lacked the motivation to actually complete his his schoolwork. And instead of graduating through the school system, he would instead get his GED before going to college. It was during this time that Jerrod met Generro, and all of this made sense, because they both lived in the same area and had very similar interests. However, it was between the years of 2010 and 2012 that certain aspects about Jerrod's behaviour became somewhat troubling. While talking about martial arts, Jerrod claimed that there was never a situation where he would tap out or submit out of a fight. The man was not bluffing either, because after giving into a bet and allowing himself to be put in a chokehold, he was choked unconscious. However, once he eventually came back around, Jerrod went absolutely ballistic at his friend. He started fighting him and spitting at him in the face, and eventually the police had to be called to split them up. No charges were filed, but it was at this point that students around Jerrod became uneasy with him, and as the months passed by, his mental state began to unravel further. Jerrod began to have intrusive thoughts about murdering someone. He wanted to know what it felt like, and these fleeting ideas gradually cemented itself into a loud internal desire that he just couldn't ignore. In a spiraling deterioration of his mental state, Jerrod abruptly decided that he had to discover these desires for real. Even to this day, no deeper rationale or motive has ever been found, and all of these disturbingly dark thoughts and insatiable urges would come to a head in December of 2012. At around 9:30 p.m. on December the 5th, 2012, Jerrod asked his friend Generro to give him a ride to the local Walmart in exchange for $20. He agreed, and both men set off shortly before 10 p.m. However, shortly after driving off in Generro's black pickup truck, the situation took a dramatic turn for the worse. After arriving at the Walmart parking lot, Jerrod pulled out his .40 caliber Smith & Wesson Springfield handgun before demanding that Generro drive to a new location further north of Asher, more specifically to an old substation road. The ominous instructions understandably panicked his friend, and so in an effort to calm him down, Jerrod took the clip out of his gun and handed it over to Generro. However, unknown to him at the time, Jerrod had a second one in his back pocket. As the two arrived at Substation Road, he inserted the second clip back into his handgun, aimed it at Generro's head, and then pulled the trigger. 2 shots instantly disabled the driver, and after hitting a tree, Jerrod got out of the truck before firing one more bullet into his friend. This tragically killing Generro instantly. Shrouded by darkness, he hastily tried to conceal the body, branches, soil and leaves forming a feeble makeshift cover. However, unknown to him at the time, but Jerrod was not actually alone. Call it fate, but as his horrific plan unfolded, another vehicle was making its way down the very same road. And through all of the commotion, the driver noticed the truck crashed against the tree. After stopping out of a matter of concern, Jerrod told the driver that he'd accidentally crashed his vehicle, and further asked if he could hitch a ride. He was then driven to his grandparents' house nearby, and after saying goodbye to the stranger, then phoned his friend for help. It is also alleged that, at that point in time, he then told his friend that he had reached Objective A. After that, he then walked to his friend's house before meeting up with his stepdad, where then, apparently, he confessed the entire harrowing event. And although his friend's stepdad was clearly disturbed, it apparently was not enough to call the police. Rather than advise him to go to the police, he instead gave Jerrod a can of WD-40, told him to mask his fingerprints with it, and even drove him to the crime scene. After hitching a ride, Jerrod then walked back to the truck, but that is when he heard the snapping of a branch in the distance. It turns out that the unknown driver had become suspicious, and after going back to investigate, he found Generro's lifeless body before dialing 911. Realizing that he would soon be a wanted man, Jerrod changed course and walked in the opposite direction towards the highway. His last-minute plan was to catch a ride and flee to Canada, despite not actually having his passport on him. However, after flagging down the first vehicle he could see, he realized that it was actually a cop car. The man had inadvertently given himself up, and, as you can imagine, was arrested immediately.
An 18-year-old murder suspect accused of killing a fellow student may have targeted others at East Central University as well. Jerrod Murray was charged Friday in Pottawatomie County with murder. Murray is accused of killing Generro Sanchez. Court records show Murray offered Sanchez $20 to drive him to Walmart last week. Several miles away from campus, Murray shot the 18-year-old victim in the head and pushed him out of the truck. Murray was arrested a short time later as he walked away from the scene on foot. Murray's roommate said the suspect had asked several other students to take him to Walmart over the past month.
Following his arrest, Jerrod was taken to the local police station, where he was then taken for interrogation, and this infamous footage makes for some truly bizarre viewing. Throughout his interview, he remained completely honest and straightforward, delivering his story in a monotone, deadpan manner. The only real way to accurately portray how strangely he acted is to show you the key points myself. Starting from the very beginning, the main thing to notice here, other than Murray's suit, is his unwavering politeness. Every statement he makes ends in "sir" where appropriate, and his words are always measured and carefully chosen. There is no rush, no slow down to think, and with little to no effort to try and be dishonest.
Hey, Jerrod. My name is Under Sheriff J.T. Palmer. Me and you met on the side of Highway 177 in about Sing Road at about 3:12 this morning, didn't we?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And at that time, you made a couple of statements to me when I put you down on the ground, and then after we got up, I read your rights to you, correct?
You read my rights before I got up, sir.
Okay. Before you got up off the ground.
Yes, sir.
But you did make a couple of statements.
Yes, sir, I did.
Before I read your rights,
sir.
without me asking you anything.
Yes, sir.
You told me you was the guy that I was trying to find.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then I read your rights to you.
Yes, sir.
And then rights was you had the right to remain silent.
The Miranda rights, sir.
Okay. Anything you say can be against you in court.
Yes, sir.
You had the right to talk to an attorney, have him present when you'd be in question.
Yes, sir.
And if you couldn't afford to hire one to be appointed to represent you.
Yes, sir.
And I asked you then if you wanted to talk to me.
Yes, sir.
Jerrod answers every single question almost immediately. He volunteers extra information and minor corrections where appropriate. And when the undersheriff is reading off his rights to him, Jerrod politely interrupts to say, "Yes, sir, the Miranda rights." He also adds minor adjustments to the sequence of events, where he reminds the interrogator that the officer read him his rights before he got him up off the ground, and not after. This is interesting because it is not a detail that makes any real difference. There is no legislation that dictates what position a criminal has to be in to be read their rights, and in this case, it doesn't affect the narrative of what happened between them. Despite this, Jerrod methodically takes the time to ensure that the recorded version of events are completely accurate.
During that talk, do you remember what you told me after I read your Miranda warning to you?
Not word for word, but the effect, yes.
Okay, and what do you remember telling me?
In summation that I'm guilty, yes.
Of what?
Of murder.
Okay, and who did you murder?
Generro.
Okay, and how did you murder him?
With a gun. I shot him in the head twice.
Okay.
3 shots were fired, 1 missed.
Jerrod was much more helpful and compliant than you would expect from someone in his situation, and while he doesn't remember word for word what the sheriff said to him, he states that he remembers the gist, which is enough to move the conversation on. He admits that he was responsible for Generro's murder in an almost helpful tone. He further admitted that he shot him in the head, and even clarified the number of shots fired. These are the main examples that essentially outline how Jerrod spoke throughout the entire 78-minute interview. His answers were almost robotic, with a clear and unthreatening undertone.
Jerrod, give me your full name.
Jerrod Lindreth Wayne Murray.
Okay, and what's your date of birth?
July the 20th, 1994.
Okay, and do you live with your mom and dad? Do you stay with your mom and dad?
No, I live at the dormitories in college. Before then, I lived with my grandparents in town.
In town of Asher?
Yes.
Okay. What do you use for an address?
My parents' house, yes.
And what is that address?
The lack of emotion and complete flatness are very bizarre things to watch. But there are other peculiar aspects to look at too. The first is how he behaves, or doesn't, when he is left alone in the room. Anyone who is seasoned in watching interrogation videos knows that people change when they are left alone. This is sometimes used as a tactic by law enforcement, whereas sometimes it is simply a necessity to gather more information or to simply take a break. I've covered a few cases that highlight this situation, where Courtney Clenny briefly turned off her tears, and Jodi Arias took her free time to perform headstands and sing. Jerrod was quite the opposite, where he remained entirely motionless. It is reported that during these 15 minutes, not a single aspect of Jerrod's position or manner had changed. Moving ahead to describing the exact sequence of events, Jerrod spoke of various details as if they were unimportant or average. His tone suggests that he could be describing any other basic day, instead of the senseless murder of a friend.
And why did all of a sudden did you decide that you need to go to Asher?
Because I was planning to take him out into the country and kill him.
Okay.
One interesting thing to note here is that there are barely any occasions where Jerrod stops to think before answering a question, and somehow, after nearly 10 minutes of immediate, full and frank instant responses, watching him sit in silence for more than 10 solid seconds is hugely unnerving. There are a few possible reasons why he may have suddenly hesitated to answer, and given what he is talking about, one particular instance sticks out. Jerrod is aware that if he admits that the plan was to go to a second location to commit murder, then it therefore shows a degree of premeditation, and his charges would therefore move into murder in the first degree. It is unclear why exactly he got so hung up on this one particular question, but it seems that once he made his decision to be truthful, he was straight back to answering all questions immediately. Through his eventual response and deeper into his interrogation, Jerrod showed no sense of self-preservation. In fact, at the very end of the interview, and asked by the sheriff what his punishment should be, he even recommended the death penalty, responding with, "An eye for an eye, sir." As you can likely imagine, Jerrod had almost certainly sealed his fate. Talking without a lawyer, providing additional information that was never requested, and being overly talkative were all very destructive actions when it came to murder. To make things worse for himself, he even admitted that he'd been planning Generro's death for several weeks prior.
I made the decision 3 days prior to the incident. Attempted it 2 days prior to the incident, but he was not in his room, and then did so today as he was in his room.
Okay. So you've been planning this for 2 days?
2 weeks, yes.
2 weeks.
But not with a selected individual, no.
Okay. And when did you get to the point where you knew it was going to be him?
That was 3 days prior to the incident.
And here, almost immediately after, he even admitted that he wanted to move to a second location for dark reasons.
And so why did you choose to take him to Asher to kill him when...
My plan was for after my killing him, I was going to head north towards Canada, and Asher was further north than Ada, so.
Okay.
That and I know the surrounding terrain, and I knew a good spot. I didn't have that spot planned in particular. If I had planned that far ahead, I would have had a grave dug. But I knew a general area.
In addition to this, Jerrod even talked about digging a grave if he had fully planned it out. Anyway, the rest of the interrogation plays out similarly to everything that we've seen so far. There is no attempt to mask his actions or discredit the damage he had caused. It is clear as day to see that we are looking at a man that does not think, behave, or perform in a neurotypical manner. One thing to note, but when describing the exact circumstances of the murder, it is one of the few times we see any animation from Jerrod. We can see his hand splay as he says the word gurgling for the second time, and this excitement is the most emotion we see during the entire interrogation process.
I loaded the gun quickly, chambered the round quickly, shot once, missed, shot a second time, hit, jumped out of the car, went around. He was driving 10-15 miles an hour, so it was rather slow. Ran around the hood of the car, and of course it was slow when he wasn't purposefully driving. Tried to pull him out, couldn't get him out until he already had hit the tree. Pulled him out there, dumped him into the... before I dumped him into the ditch, I heard him gurgling. I'm not sure if that was a physiological or physical process after death, but I thought that he might have still lived through that somehow, because he was gurgling, so I shot him again and then shoved him down in the ditch.
Moving to the legal proceedings of this case, Jerrod Murray would finally stand trial on July 7th, 2015, taking almost 3 years to get there due to the multiple background reports that were required. Multiple psychological evaluations were conducted, all diagnosing him with several mental health conditions, including bipolar and schizophrenia. Several testimonies were revealed during his trial, including one from his headmaster from high school who marked him as intelligent, polite, and with no historic issues of violence. He also confirmed that it was during high school that Jerrod began to wear a suit and tie to all classes, and when asked about his character, he described him as always quirky, a little different. It is also worth mentioning here that, as far as he was aware, there were no signs of bullying during his school years. When it came to his past, Jerrod had no criminal history prior to the murder. He was never in trouble with the law, never took any drugs, and showed no signs of murderous capability. Saying that, it is worth highlighting that, following his fight with a friend, a report was made to the campus police. Several classmates noted that they were afraid of Jerrod and, quote, were worried that he would blow them all up, as apparently he always talked about making bombs. Aside from this incident, which happened not long before Generro's murder, there were no other obvious red flags or warnings. Although experts were not able to mutually agree what sort of mental health conditions he was suffering from at the time of the murder, both the prosecution and defense agreed that, during the time of the killing, he did not know right from wrong. As a result, Jerrod Murray was found not guilty by reason of insanity, and, as you can likely imagine, this angered Generro's family and friends. After deeming him not guilty by reason of insanity, the district attorney said the following: "You will never convince me that this man is not a danger to society. Today, tomorrow, 5 years from now, 50 years from now." This was the most chilling confession that I've ever seen in 25 years of doing this job. When I watched his confession, it scared the hell out of me, because there was nothing but a blank look in his eyes as he answered the questions. As a result, Jerrod was sent to Oklahoma Forensic Center in Veneta, a secure facility where he was monitored and repeatedly evaluated. In September 2015, psychologist Peter Rausch reported that Jerrod was not presently mentally ill, and furthermore, was not a present danger to society. The decision taken on that day in July was up for review in November of the same year due to this single dissenting report, and word spread around the small community that perhaps Jerrod may be released. While this proved unfounded, and he is unlikely to ever walk the streets as a free man again, the thought of him getting out after such a brief stint only served to fan the flames of those who thought he was getting away with it. Addressing the press gathered outside, one of Generro's friends said, "When I heard that one of the experts had said he was no longer a threat, I felt so terrified. When you have a wolf by the ears, you don't let him go. Jerrod is an animal that needs to be kept away from those who he thinks wronged him." While Jerrod was diagnosed with multiple mental disorders by a slew of psychiatrists after his crime, it is important to note that he had never been treated for any prior to the incident. Many questions remain over how much of his odd behavior and strange mannerisms should have been noticed in the years prior. Though saying that, I can't say that I'm surprised. Discovery and discussion of mental health is still very much in its primitive years, and especially when in rural areas. Jerrod remains in a psychiatric facility to this day. He remains relatively well disciplined with his medication, and the current prognosis is that he has responded well to them. However, he does experience relapse whenever he decides he no longer needs his medication, and when he comes off of it, it is the opinion of qualified professionals that he would definitely kill again. Fresh psychiatric reports on Jerrod state that he suffered from delusions and antisocial personality disorder. He sometimes believed that he was king of the world and that he could see ghosts. Other medical reports suggest that he may have had schizoaffective disorder and/or type 1 bipolar disorder. It is kind of obvious that the unique aspect behind this story is Jerrod's very bizarre behavior during his interrogation, and it's unlikely you'll ever find anything as bizarre as this again. Where most killers try to justify why they had to kill someone or even boast in their own success, this is not the case for Jerrod Murray. Instead, he is unwaveringly polite. He doesn't try to lie, relish in his actions, or even make excuses. Instead, he's just dreadfully straightforward. The tone and pacing of his words never seem to change, and he lists off his address in the same manner as describing how he murdered his friend. Honestly, it is so strange to see. Generro Sanchez's murder was cold, calculated, and with ample premeditation. And although it's abundantly clear that he was mentally unwell at the time, Jerrod still robbed a friend of their life and future for no credible reason. I don't believe that anyone can watch this footage and come away thinking he is of sound mind. And even when he was being transferred out of the courtroom, he answered each question by the press in a blank and deadpan manner.
Anything to say for yourself today?
No, ma'am.
Any reason why you might have done this to this young man?
No, ma'am.
No reason.
No, ma'am.
You have nothing to say for yourself.
No, ma'am.
You want to tell the community anything?
No, ma'am.
Did you confess to police?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you proud of what you've done?
No, ma'am.
Do you have remorse for what you've done?
No, ma'am.
Granted, Jerrod is not proud, but he also feels no remorse. He knows what he did was wrong, but he decided to do it anyway. He understands etiquette well enough to answer questions respectfully and truthfully, but still murdered a man whom he considered a friend. Nicknamed the well-mannered murderer, he is a complete contradiction in many ways, and is so alien to standard expectations of murderers that it makes his case truly unique. When describing his choice of victim, Jerrod said that he settled on Generro because he believed that his death would make the least impact on those around him, and furthermore, that barely anyone would miss him afterward.
And why him? Of all the kids in college here, why him?
I believed that he would have had the least impact, sir.
Impact of on what?
I believed he didn't have many friends, or many close friends, I should rephrase. And as his, as he is going missing, his absence would be less notable.
When they were in the truck together before the killing, Jerrod said that both men spoke about their childhoods and their upbringings. Generro described his struggles with his weight and how it gave him confidence issues while growing up. However, despite his insecurity, he still managed to make many friends at college with shared interests to him. Right at the end of the interrogation, and when asked to reflect on his choice of victim, Jerrod admitted that Generro had many friends and a loving girlfriend. Both partners were texting each other throughout his final journey, and it seems that, in the end, there were plenty of people who mourned for him. I guess the saddest part about this story is that, looking online, there is so much information about Jerrod, yet barely any about Generro. His loss is felt keenly by his family, friends, acquaintances, colleagues, and classmates. Hundreds attended his funeral, and moving forward, he will be sorely missed. Anyway folks, I think that is it for me today. I'm feeling pretty tired, and to be honest, I don't know why. I mean, I did only have one coffee, so that is probably why. So, what do you think about Jerrod's verdict? Do you think he got what he deserved, or do you think he should have been found guilty? And do you think he could kill again? As always, please let me know in the comment section down below. So you probably realised that recently I've only been posting once a week, but hopefully, fingers crossed, it should now be 2 a week from every week onwards. We'll see how it goes though, because it honestly depends on if you guys want 2 shorter videos a week or 1 long one like 45 minutes. I guess it just kind of depends on the type of case available, and if one really grips me, then I'll do a long form version. Anyway folks, that's pretty much it for me today. As always, if you'd like to see more videos, please head over to my Patreon, and if you want to see more of my adventures, head over to my social media. On that note, I'll see you again very, very soon. So please look after yourself, look after each other, and of course, stay safe. Thank you, and goodbye.